So again, thank you all so much for joining me tonight. We are here for Armchair Travel National Parks of the Colorado Plateau. Roughly centered on the Four Corners region of Southwestern US, the Colorado Plateau is mainly composed of high desert lands that are home to 7 national parks. Our presenter tonight, Steve Farrar, will recount stories of his travels in the area as he takes us on a tour of red rock country that includes a wide variety of amazing natural images, from fantastic rock formations to ancient cliff dwellings, from expansive canyon vistas to soaring arches and tight slot canyons. Steve's stories, photos, and videos are sure to inspire you to explore some of America's most treasured places. And Steve has visited 61 of our 62 national parks, including hiking to the bottom of the Grand Canyon, scuba diving in the coral reefs of the Virgin Islands, camping among the wolves of Isle Royale, scaling rock faces in Yosemite, and climbing to the summits of Mount Rainier and Denali. So let's see, almost 70 of us here live. Let's give a big virtual round of applause to Steve for joining us here tonight. And Steve, you can take it away. Thanks so much.
All right. The heck with winter. We're heading to the Red Rock areas. Colorado Plateau. These are I've made several trips out this way, so you're going to see kind of an amalgam of images. Some of them date back to a solo trip in 1985. I subsequently returned to the area with a couple of my I have 3 boys. We have 3 boys. My wife doesn't like me referring to them as my boys. But mom was uninvited from those trips. As grade school, great time to bring kids out there, 8th to 10th grade, where you don't have to carry them, but they're not yet off on their own. And then actually some of the images are from a few months ago, where we had a wondrous trip in July. All 4 of us, the 3 boys and I, spent a week in Moab. So you'll see if I'm in the pictures or my boys are in the pictures, they're my pictures. Some of them were taken at a time where you don't really want to see my Kodak Instamatics from the 70s and stuff. When they get blown up to high resolution, they're pretty shaky. So some of them have been replaced with images taken from national park websites and stuff, but they all represent areas that I've been to. The Colorado Plateau, as you can see on the screen here, there's not a lot of it in Colorado, actually. It's just the geographical name of it. Mainly starts in Utah. 5 of the wondrous Canyonlands go across southern Utah. And then we have Mesa Verde over in the southwest corner of Colorado, and we'll be ending up with a trip to the Grand Canyon. So buckle up for a virtual tour of the West. We'll start in Utah. The 5 red images there are the 5 national parks that spread from west to east right across the southern part of the state. They do have several national monuments. And a lot of those, over half of our 62 national parks started out as national monuments. It takes an act of Congress to create a national park, but a sitting president with the stroke of a pen can create a national monument. So some of them start as national monuments, and if their status warrants it, somewhere along the line they end up getting upgraded to national park status. So we're going to start over in the southwest corner in Zion. That's my great white whale. Back in the 80s, where I would go visiting parks, you used to be able to drive into Zion. Not anymore. It's a closed area. There's the visitor center right at the entrance there, where you come in from the town of Springdale. And the parks out west are about half and half. Some of them, you're at the bottom and you're looking up at the formations. Others, like Zion, where the road is at the bottom. Others, like Bryce Canyon or the Grand Canyon, you travel along the upper rims and you're looking down at formations. The problem with Zion is that driving around in it, it's kind of as you'll see, it's a hemmed in canyon, and the fumes from automobiles was not clearing out very well. It was kind of hanging in there and creating some pollution. So they've now banned private vehicles from driving. You leave your car at the entrance parking area, and they have electric shuttles that take you throughout the park down. There's only one main road actually, but this is an eye opener. When, as you can see, the Virgin River carved the canyon. So the river's down in the middle, and there's not a lot of room outside of on either bank. So there's one road that they've chiseled out enough room for a road, and that's about it. But this is a normal view of looking up Zion Canyon. The Virgin River bears this not even the slightest resemblance to the mighty Colorado that we'll see when we go to the Grand Canyon. It doesn't look like it's really enough to have carved this canyon, but the descent, the rate of descent is what comes into play here. The Colorado Plateau, the high area up north of the park, is about 9,000 feet elevation. And through the course of not many miles, it drops to only 4,000 feet. So at 80 feet per mile average, the rate of descent is 10 times that of the Colorado through the Grand Canyon. So spring snow melt and rainy seasons, it does some serious water damage or eroding. Now, when you're the first ones in an area, you get to name things. And nobody lived out in this neck of the woods. It's not very hospitable for farming or anything. So the Mormons, when they were on the Mormon Trail heading down to find a promised land from Chicago area, they were the first ones in here. So Zion itself is Hebrew for a place of peace and relaxation. That you're looking at Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob peaks, because the Mormons were the ones that got to name the structures in the park. And there's quite a few of them. Two of the absolute most amazing, two in the top 5 top hikes anywhere in the US national parks are in Zion National Park. One is the one on the screen, which is called the Narrows, for obvious reasons. The 2,000-foot sheer cliff walls are smooth because of the river carving it, and they constrict to almost, you can almost touch the walls. They're less than 30 feet in places. So it's not much of a hike. It's more of a wade. Water shoes are good. Stabilizing hiking staffs help as well. It is required that you get a backcountry permit if you're going to go through the Narrows, because you can have the sunniest, grandest day where you are, but it really doesn't matter. What happens is way up on the plateau, there may be a flash rainstorm, and in a matter of mere minutes, the rushing water can, well, as you can read down below, the river back in 54, the river swelled 50 times its height in a matter of 15 minutes because of a rainstorm that happened. If you happen to be walking through when the tidal wave hits, that's not a good thing. So what the rangers do is, before they'll issue any backcountry permits, is they'll check the weather and make sure that today's an acceptable day to be hiking in the Narrows and without getting caught. Now, this is a rare shot. It's gotten very, very popular, with Outside Magazine naming it one of the best hikes in the country and stuff. You're going to have company. Rarely would you see it. You'd have to get up pretty early to get a vacant picture like this. But it's fun. Well worth the effort. Zion Lodge, some of the great lodges, this would make a bucket list in and of itself. Is if you pick a lucky 6 numbers at some point and don't have to worry about funding it, staying in some of the lodges, the grand old lodges built by the railroads. The railroads back in the teens and in the 20s connected to make the parks available, like Glacier and Yellowstone and Yosemite. But the Easterners wanted some nice places to stay. So lodges like this one, the Zion is fairly low key. Hasn't changed. This is from the 1925, and there it is today. So it's built into the side and low profile. But just staying in the grand old lodges would be a fun bucket list in and of itself, is my point. That's about the only lodging other than a couple campgrounds in the park itself. These are the shuttle buses that are, they have regular stops, but they're pretty, if you come to a trailhead and just get out on the road and wave your hand, they'll stop and pick you up. So you can get pretty much dropped off or picked up wherever you want to. It's very easy to get around. The the one day I did a solo trip in 1985, and the one single day that I was in Zion, the Army Corps of Engineers happened to have a Chinook helicopter that they were using for the day to ferry cement to pour up one of the trails that I'll show you a little later. So the one trail that I had wanted to go hike was inaccessible that day. So I had to go up, find a plan B, which was the East Rim. The river you can see makes a little loop there, and then the black line is the road alongside it. And then the series of switchbacks, the squiggly line is the East Rim Trail. The problem with hiking by yourself, and I mentioned this is 1985, so no cracks about the length of the shorts. That's what Larry Bird and Kevin McHale were wearing at that time. This is pre-selfie stick era. So if I'm by I hiked for about 5 to 6 hours, never saw another person. So number one, you want to check in with the rangers before you start, because if I turn an ankle or something, you're kind of up the creek. The cavalry is not coming. You're on your own. So I would tell the rangers when I expected to be back, so that they'd look for me if I didn't show. But there also was no one there to take any pictures. So at this time, what I had to do was prop up my camera, set the little timer, and then run around to get in the picture. So pictures like this, I had to precariously perch, well, the camera to begin with, and I'm standing on the edge of a 2,000-foot drop on the edge there behind me. This is at the summit of the east rim of the park, looking across at the western face. Looking down the canyon from that vantage point, you see the fin in the middle. That up at the top of that is called Angel's Landing. That was my intended destination for the day, and this is the sign at the base of that Angel's Landing. This was from 10 years ago. There were 6 people had died. It's gotten worse since. To get up to the top of it, you have to hike along the spine there. It's not exactly walking on a railroad track, but that sheer face is duplicated on the right-hand side as well. So it's a couple 1,000-foot drop on either side. So if you're afraid of heights, this is not one that you want to be doing. So how do you get up there? Well, it's a pretty straight climb. It's got to be in pretty good shape. Having done the Stairmaster in advance stands you in good stead, but this is the series of switchbacks that enable you to scale straight up the side of the thing. This is the path that the helicopters were, there used to be a dirt path or just raw rock, but it was getting eroded. So the helicopters in third week in April in 1985 were pouring the cement to shore up Walter's Wiggles here. Walter was the first superintendent of Zion, so it was named after him. He was the first one that carved out this path to get up to the top there. It's a series of 21 switchbacks that, here's the view from the top looking down. These poor souls down the bottom are just starting the back and forth and back and forth and back and forth and up, 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 up. It's like going up a ladder for about 1,500 feet, basically. But when you get up there, it's pretty fun. There are a couple of hand railings on the inside. Note the lack of any guardrail between you and the drop off. That's from Scouts Landing, a resting spot. And then if you choose to, you can continue on up to Angel's Landing, up the Stegosaurus spine here. The reward from up top is that you can sit there looking down at the little travel shuttle buses way down below. I had brought my son up there when he was in the 8th grade, and this was a couple summers ago. This is my youngest of my 3 boys, Galen. He spent his birthday here. This was morning, because this is looking north from the summit of Angel's Landing. So the early sun to the right or to the east is shining on him. He spent the morning climbing to the top of Angel's Landing, and then spent the afternoon wading up the Narrows. So he got both hikes in for a very memorable birthday. It's kind of fun. That's Zion, and it's kind of hard to take a bad picture. You're going to hear that refrain in several of the parks that we're going to be visiting, but these are the overlooks that you can drive right to this spot. You don't even have to hike to it. Pretty amazing park. So heading north from there, and these parks, by the way, I took the boys on spring vacation. You want to forever change your conception of what a desert's all about. Go to this area the 3rd week in April, because every living thing in the desert bursts into flowers and blooms. And you learn in your 4th grade geography how desiccated and dry and foreboding a place a desert is. Well, you'll come away with a very different opinion when the red paintbrushes and purple flowers and stuff are just everywhere. It's beautiful. But in the spate of just the vacation week plus the weekends on either end, in 10 days we ended up hiking in 7 national parks. So they're all spaced a couple hundred miles, a few hours drive apart from each other. Bryce is a couple hours up the road from Zion. You can see Zion in the lower corner, then Bryce. Just to give you an idea on pricing, if you're going to go to a bunch of them, either the annual pass, or once you hit 62, you're eligible for the lifetime. I think they're up to $80 now. I got it on my 62nd birthday. I went into a visitor center holding a $20 bill. They were $20 at the time for a lifetime pass to all National Park Service administered locations. That was a good deal. They didn't make any money on me. Bryce Canyon, north to south, very narrow park. The Mormon settlers Ebenezer and Mary Bryce were the ones that named the place. They homesteaded there. It's only 5 miles wide, and it's actually the opposite of Zion. The northern end is lower elevation at 6,000 feet, where you come into the visitors center. And as you drive the red line there, the road up at the top of the cliffs, you're gaining elevation. You climb up to 9,000 feet. It's not really a canyon. They call it Bryce Canyon. It's an amphitheater. It's open. It's one of the most phantasmagoric geological formations you'll ever set eyes on. To me, it looks like something that Walt Disney would have come up with if he was doing some pretty amazing drugs. It just doesn't look that nature could do this on their own, but they're all freestanding. They're called hoodoos, the rock formations. And you can get very high wow factor images and pictures going along the top. You can just drive if you want, but it is my very, very strong suggestion that at any of the parks, that the way to truly get a feel for them is to get down and do some hiking and get out into the park. the gritty texture of the sandstone. There's nothing in New England that I could point to tell the boys, well, it's kind of like this or something. It isn't. It's very unique to the area. So we did a hike down the Navajo Loop down into it, and the perception of the different formations. This is a famous one called Thor's Hammer. But your perspective changes as you hike down and down and down. This is what passes for a trail. It's basically just the way to get down into it. There are the boys heading down to the bottom, where there's all kinds of rock bridges and arches and formations that you can climb all over the place on, and really get a feel for the difference of, it's nothing like the granite here in New Hampshire, for example. It's sedimentary, actually. The whole area used to be under a great inland sea. So for eons, the sediment would build up at the bottom of the sea. So the deposit's about 1,000 feet thick. The sandstone is not the hard sandstone of the cliffs in Zion. It's much more crumbly. As you drive along the rim, we went down in the morning and then spent the afternoon driving higher. Every time you get up, they have these scenic vista turnouts, and every one will give you a different view of the amphitheater. And depending on where the sun is, it'll pick up the different colorations of the mineral layers. Iron is orange, the manganese is blue, and if it's overhead, the shadows come into play, and you don't even have to travel. You can just sit in one spot, and as the sun moves, the complexion of the visage in front of you shifts and changes constantly through the day. It's pretty amazing. Rainbow Point at 9,100 is the highest point, and it allows you to look back way from the top is where you started, but this will give you an idea of it's not an enclosed canyon. It's just an open cliff face that's carved all along the way. So that's what Bryce Canyon's all about. The next one up is Capitol Reef. Capitol Reef's right smack in the middle. It's shaped very similar to Bryce in that it's very narrow, but it's much, much longer. It's actually over 100 miles long. It completely encompasses the entire 100-mile-long water pocket fold. The name of the park, Capitol Reef, the reef in olden usage, we refer to reefs more in reference to a coral reef, which is a barrier around an island that the coral makes for protecting a bay or an inlet. It is a barrier and can be used for other terms. Well, if you were traveling in a covered wagon in the 1800s and you came to the middle of this is an aerial view of water pocket fold. The earth basically has a giant wrinkle, and you can look for 50 miles in either direction, north or south, and there's no way to get past it. It just runs right down the middle of Utah like a wall. That one road that now is accessible didn't open until the 60s. Water pocket is the term up on top of the holes that are hollowed out through erosion, that they do hold water. You'd have to be pretty thirsty to drink out of it, though. They have a lot of microorganisms swimming around in there. And if you're Mormon, when you see rock formations like this, it reminds you of the Capitol building. So that's where the term Capitol and Reef came from, because if you see mountains like this and you're a French fur trapper in Wyoming, you call it the Grand Tetons. If you're a Mormon, it reminds you of the Capitol building. So that's where Capitol Reef got its name. It's one of the least visited parks in the system. This is basically what you get. It's way out there. There are no towns anywhere near it or anything. Very need high clearance would be good. Four-wheel drive is almost a must to get around there. I took a trip down Grand Wash. There's my van, which same as going through the Narrows. They actually have a van trail called the Narrows that gets you to the base of Cassidy Arch. Cassidy Arch. This closes to closer than 30 feet, and they're the same 1,500 to 2,000 foot sheer walls on either side. You have to come down through the Narrows to get to the trailhead to climb up to this Cassidy Arch. It's named after Butch Cassidy. Legend has it that this was one of his more popular hideouts, mainly because you can see for about 100 miles in any direction, so no posse's going to sneak up on you. But this was a place that we visited this summer. I took this picture in 1985. I was up there for 2 to 3 hours, never saw another person, no one came. I think 30 seconds, maybe 60 seconds was the longest timer that I could set my camera at. And it's so far around to run around this big opening to get over onto the arch. I was never able to get into, run as fast as I could. I couldn't get into any of the pictures. So, but that's what it looked like in 1985. I took this picture this past July, and that's me with my 3 boys, 35 years after that picture was taken. It's the beauty of the national parks. It shows you that generation after generation, you just go there and nothing changes. It's, well, number one, I was very, very blessed to be able to, at 65, get back up where I was at age 30. But to see my boys have the exact same, they were the age now that I was when I first went up there. And I remember my excitement of climbing up these awesome rock formations and, oh, I can get up there and I can get over there and stuff. They had the exact same reaction that I did when I was there at age 30. It was really fun to share that with them. That's my oldest son, Brooks. So this is the view from up on top. And like I said, you can see for miles and miles. And by the way, one guy with a rifle could hold off the cavalry because everybody's got to go single file through the Narrows to get to the trailhead to get up there. So it's a pretty good place for a hideout. There is up in the northern section, you can take some effort to get out there. This is the middle of nowhere, but these rock formations really do look like they were carved. I mean, you would expect to see something like this over in Egypt in the Valley of the Tombs or something. This is just a formation that nature created. And that's up at Sunset Point, watching the sunset. So that's what Capitol Reef, if you want to be out there, if solitude is your thing, this is a good place for you. And it is one of the international dark sky parks because of the lack of any sort of human-created man-made light. That's not a cloud, that's the Milky Way. So if you camp out there, you'll see more stars at night than you. Number one, the desert air is very, very dry. And there are just more billions of stars than you ever thought existed. It's a beautiful place to camp. Arches. Arches now is on the eastern side of Utah. It's right out, it's literally on the border, maybe within the confines of the town of Moab. Like a lot of the parks, there's literally one road that goes right through the park. The whole thing, there are arches, natural arches in other places around the world. Nowhere else is there the degree of concentration of arches that you'll find here. I'm not going to show you 2,000 pictures, but it's a relatively small, as national parks go, 114 square miles is not very big. It's a relatively small park, and there are over 2,000 natural arches in them. Why? Well, this is an aerial view. There's the one road that brings you up to Devil's Garden in the northern section of the park, and you go by a section called Fiery Furnace. From the air, you can see the fins that are forming. This, like the rest of Utah, used to be underwater. The inland sea evaporated over years and years and years and formed a very, very thick layer of salt. And then it got covered over with sediments. Well, salt doesn't do it very well under pressure. It pushes back, it bends, it deforms. So the entire area of Arches National Park sits on a giant dome of salt that keeps getting pushed up. What happens is if you start on the left side and the dome pushes the sediment up, the surface fractures, and now you've got a crack. Well, now water can do its thing, and water gets in there, and over time widens and widens and widens the opening slot there until you get the middle picture where the fins end up standing free. Eventually, the undersides of the fins, which are weaker and exposed to wind and water erosion, start dropping away, and you end up with an arch. So in the Fiery Furnace section, these are the freestanding fins, and it's not a good place to get lost. Map and compass is good. We took this from a hike we did in July. But there are these freestanding fins all over the place that are basically incipient arches. They'll erode into an arch. You can see the car on the left there to put that in perspective as to the relative size of that freestanding fin, the organ. And they're all over the place. This is the Three Gossips. Very accessible. You can drive to pretty close to a lot of these. The arches, again, there are parking areas here near Skyline Arch. You can walk right up to it. This is on the trail out to Double O Arch, Landscape Arch. That's my middle son, Jake. The path used to go right up underneath it, but in 1991, which wasn't all that long ago, luckily there were no tourists visiting at the time. There was no one standing under it, but that debris underneath Landscape Arch dropped away from the underside. So if you want to see Landscape Arch, you got to go in the next few years, because at some point that thin spot, this is the longest arch in any of the parks. It's over 300 feet across, and it's going to drop. This is Double O Arch. There's one down at the bottom, and then on the same rock formation, there's one up above it. There's another one called Double Arch in the southern area, and this was fun. Those are my kids in the middle there climbing up, which is, like I said, why Mom was uninvited from this trip, because they turned to me and they asked, "Dad, can I climb up there?" And I said, well, it depends on what you're asking. Are you asking for permission, or are you asking for my assessment of your climbing abilities? Can you go up there? Sure, at the national park, you can go wherever you want. Well, that's all they needed to hear. There's the parking area where you can see the cars and the bus there, and you just walk over. That's me sitting down at the bottom, and there's my youngest. I think he was 14 at the time. He's about 110 feet up off the deck. He got up to where the arch was starting to overhang, and he couldn't go any further, but he didn't have a climbing partner. He wasn't roped in. He just scrambled up there on his own and was darn proud of himself to get up there. I think he, to this day, has that as the desktop wallpaper on his laptop. He was darn proud of himself. But you can see the people in the arch. This is the Skyline section. It's all kinds of hikes. They have their balance rock there as well. The The only way to see arches is to get out and walk. They don't have mule rides or anything. There's no shortcuts. If you want to go out and see this terrain, you gotta hike it. And primitive trail beyond this point is being kind. If you can, there's a few piles of rocks called cairns, and that's the only way that you know that you're heading in the right direction is you see a few cairns around. The one must-do hike in Arches is out to the symbol of the park, which is Delicate Arch. Delicate Arch is an iconic image. It's the one that's on the Utah license plate, actually. That's my son Galen over on the right-hand side in the amphitheater. That's Delicate Arch up at the top. You never really see the open amphitheater in front of it, so I took it there. That's when he climbed up to be under the arch itself. It's about 87 feet tall. And again, what you don't see is the drop off behind it. you stand there and everybody waits in line to get their lone picture under the arch. But it's a sheer drop off right behind it. This is looking west towards the sunset and gives you a good view of that bowl. It's also very, very dark out in the desert. This is lit up artificially for the picture, and they do that in some of the areas. That's a big floodlight at Double O Arch or Double Arch. Right nestled in and around Arches is Canyonlands National Park, the fifth one in Utah. Canyonlands is just below Arches there on the right-hand side. What we have is the confluence of the Green River coming down from Wyoming and the Colorado River flowing down out of the Rockies. The Colorado you can see coming down on the right, and then the Green River is the blue line to the left. The two of them have carved separate canyons, and each one of them is amazing. Island in the Sky has then been isolated by the two rivers. The rivers join together at the southern point of Island in the Sky, Mesa, and then their combined volume of what is then continues as the Colorado River. The stem of the Y, if you will, is about a 14-mile stretch known as Cataract Canyon. And I'll show you what that looks like. But that divides the lower section, the southern section of the park, into the western shore, which is called the Maze, and the eastern shore, the Needles district. So we'll start up in Island in the Sky. Island in the Sky this is not the Grand Canyon. This is Canyonlands. But you're about 2,200 feet up off the deck, off the river surface. So your panoramic view is just unsurpassed. The absolute must-do when visiting Canyonlands is to get your butt out of bed early and come out to Mesa Arch. Very short hike. You can drive. There's a parking area there. But you've got to come. This is the single most photographed sunrise picture, maybe outside of some of the lighthouses in Acadia or from the top of Cadillac Mountain in Acadia. Probably the most photographed sunrise spot in any of the national parks. In the green shirt is my son Brooks, and he's getting used to, he's setting up his tripod looking underneath the arch, because when the sun rises, what happens is the rays of the sun light up the underside of the arch, and it's a that's the money shot. But you have to be in it. You have about 5 seconds to take your shot to get the starburst and the sunburst and stuff. So you got to be ready for it. Worth getting up for. My younger son, Galen, had already gotten that picture when he was there in a previous visit. So he wanted to see from looking back at the arch from above. I can't blow this up. If it were a screen and I could widen it, there's a dot dead center on the top of that cliff. That's my son Galen. He ran about 3/4 of a mile around the rim there. He ran to be up at the summit of that, looking back at us at the arch to take this picture, which is the sunrise. And that's the other side of the arch drops away thousands of feet to down into the Canyonlands. But it's just a fantastic area. Again, you can't take a bad picture, so it doesn't really matter your vantage point. You're going to get a keeper, a postcard quality shot pretty much wherever you are. But the underside is kind of fun on Mesa Arch. Up in north of the visitor center in Island in the Park is an impact crater. Some of the geologists argue that it's a salt dome that heaved up. Others say it's a meteorite that hit, whatever. There's a road about halfway down, 1,000 feet down and 1,000 feet up. In the middle of the plateau, there's a white rim road that makes for an awesome multi-day bike ride. It's a little over 100 miles. But the awesome road, they discovered uranium in the area. I want to say back in the 30s, maybe 30s or 40s. And this Schaefer Trail Road was hewn out of the side of the mesa as a means of getting the uranium ore down out of where they mined it. It's a lot of hairpin snake switchbacks and stuff, and it's long. Galen and Brooks, my oldest and youngest sons, decided that even though it was 105 degrees, they wanted to take the mountain bikes down it. So you don't have to pedal an awful lot going, but you want to make sure that your brakes are working. They had quite a ride coming down this road on mountain bikes. You don't have to do that. You can travel. Moab is like Mecca for mountain bikers. To bike on the slick rock and stuff is just nirvana. A lot of the trails, you're just set back. You're not along the balancing on the edge of the rim, but you get the scenic vistas all alongside you. It's a beautiful place. Or you can grab a raft trip down Cataract Canyon. This is what happens when the combined volume of the Green River flows into the Colorado River and you get the combined one. This is what 14 miles of whitewater of this looks like down below where they join together. Very, very memorable whitewater rafting there. Moab is a pretty high adrenaline location. Now, the western area west of the Colorado is the Maze District. It's virtually inaccessible. The only way to get to it is a 46-mile unpaved road, which you better have very, very high clearance and four-wheel drive to get in there. I've never met anybody who's been in there. I don't know why you would want to. This is an overhead view of what you'd be hiking into why you would want to enter this, where the canyon's just dead end and you got to retrace your steps and try another area and see if that goes anywhere and stuff. It's beyond me. That's why not a lot of people go there. But if you stay over on the east coast, the east side of the river, you can get to the Needles District. This is accessible driving to it. And there's a bunch of hikes there. Actually, there you can take commercial Jeep tours and leave the driving to them. They'll take you up on places that you normally wouldn't consider perhaps driving up. You can't always rent one and try it yourself if you want, but it's not as easy as it looks. I chose to hike. I went out. This was again the third week in April, so I've got gloves and a little chilly. You're up at 7,000 feet elevation. I hiked out. You can climb up on the mushrooms here. Those are some petroglyphs, some ancient Anasazi carvings that you see along the way. Fat man's misery, getting through this section. And again, outside of the glow on the horizon, that's the town of Moab. A lot of darkness, a lot of billions and billions of stars if you do camp out there. So now we leave Utah and go over into the southwest corner of Colorado, and Mesa Verde is right there where the sticker is, just short of Durango. You climb to get up to into the park. The visitors center is down at 6,000 elevation, and you climb up to 8,500. So it's a 23-mile drive, and there's only one alternative turn. Other than that, it's just one slog up the same road. It was just discovered in 1888, and it actually was the cause for Teddy Roosevelt creating the Antiquities Act, because he was in the early 1900s, Teddy Roosevelt was president, and he got word back that this new archaeological find, all these ruins, were being raped and pillaged. They were being raided, and all the pottery was being stolen and stuff. And he wanted the area protected as a national park. As I mentioned before, it takes an act of Congress to create a national park. And believe it or not, even in the early 1900s, Congress didn't necessarily want to give the president what the president wanted. There was a division. So Teddy, being Teddy, he said, well, the heck with you. And he created the Antiquities Act that allows the sitting president, with the stroke of a pen, to create a national monument. Doesn't have the same level of protection that a national park does, but at least he could then now station federal troops in there to protect the area. So it did give it some level of protection. Devil's Tower actually was the first national monument using the Antiquities Act, but Mesa Verde followed soon after. This is why there are no roads connecting east to west. It's just a series of these fingers of mesa tops. So I think they call the politically correct term for the Anasazi is now ancient Pueblans, I guess. So the ancient Pueblans lived up on top of the mesa for years and years. And there were a lot of them. 4,300 sites have been, that's just what they've already found. And they're discovering more and more every year up on top of the mesa. So they lived up on here for maybe 600 years. And then nobody knows why, but then they went down didn't go down to the valley floor, down at the base of the mesas. They went halfway and built these cliff dwellings that were pretty tricky to access, actually. After about 100 years, the entire civilization vanished. Nobody knows why. It happened very, very suddenly. Literally, there was corn still in pots in the cliff dwelling rooms. There were arrows still in the quivers and the bows and arrows in the rooms. They just, boom, disappeared. This is an example of one of the cliff dwellings. There are over 600 such dwellings, and you can see the cars up and the Winnebago up at the top. You park along the mesa top, and then there are a series of stairs to get down to this level. Well, then you have to climb up to get into the park. There's a 32-foot ladder to get up into one of the cliffs. This is a medium-sized one. It's got 40 rooms. They're beautiful, but the view isn't much. You're just looking at the other side of the adjacent finger of mesa. They're all carved in stone. This is the big baby, Cliff Palace. 150 individual separate rooms carved into the 400-foot thick slab of sandstone. Same thing, you're up at the top where you park, and then there are ranger-led tours. You come down a series of stainless steel stairways to get down into it, and you can hike around in the park, The rangers will hold forth and explain the different structures. Those circular holes in the ground are called kivas. That's where the medicine men used to go down there and smoke their peyote buttons and chat up. The roof support on the right, there used to be a top on them, but those are organic. They were well, here's one that they've reconstructed up on top to show you what they used to look like. The logs have long since eroded and now they're open like this, but they used to be closed and you would go down the ladder into the structure. So there's Galen and Jake and myself exploring Cliff Palace. As you come up, this is a simplified layout. As you come up from the visitor center, there's only one turn. If you go straight, you go to Cliff Palace. If you take a right on the way up, you get over to the west side, and the longhouse is very, very similar. You just go down the steps 150 feet down from the parking area, and you get down to another cliff dwelling like this that you can climb up into the structures and see. This was the first national park, and for the longest time, the only national park that was dedicated to the preservation of man-made ruins. All of the other national parks before Gateway Arch got upgraded recently, that all the other parks were natural features. Cliff Palace was the first man-made. They built them facing towards the west, so all afternoon the setting sun is pointing right into the cliffs, and it warms them up, and they stay warm well into the evenings. So it was a pretty strategic location. They aren't normally lit up like this, but like for New Year's Eve or something, the rangers will go around and put lights down in the kivas to get very memorable photo opportunities. That's Mesa Verde. It's in the Four Corners area. That's my son Galen with a foot and a hand in each of 4 states. It's the only place in the United States where 4 states come together. So he's got Arizona, Utah, Colorado, and New Mexico. He's in 4 states all at once. And they hadn't been out west before. They hadn't traveled before. So I had gotten some John Wayne movies to show them where we were heading, what the scenery was going to be like out there. And they saw the backdrop. A lot of the old Western movies were filmed in Monument Valley. And very noticeable are these mitten formations. Well, the kids just assumed that somebody had just drawn the background, the backdrop to those sceneries, that wasn't real. So it was kind of fun to, having seen them in the movies, to then stand at the visitor center here at Monument Valley and say, see, there's the formations. It was filmed here. So there's Mesa Verde, Four Corners, following it along to Monument Valley, and down to the southwest brings us to Grand Canyon. If you can only visit one park, as Teddy, he got around. Teddy Roosevelt went to a lot of cool places, but for him to stand on his first visit and look out over it and declare this the absolute most impressive piece of scenery he's ever looked at in his life is saying something. Canyon fun facts: it's carved by the Colorado, 4 to 13 miles. It's as far down as 6,000 feet from the plateau's surface all the way down to the river. North to south, it runs 277 miles, so it's a long park. The East Rim is the most frequented. When we were going here with the boys, I started 9 months in advance to try to get reservations. There's only a handful of campsites down at the bottom of the, you need a backcountry permit to stay overnight. And there's only a handful of campsites. I think you can reserve them up to 2 years in advance now. So it's like pulling teeth trying to find one. And I got put on a waiting list. And I was rather impatient about it because I really wanted to hike down to the bottom with the boys. And if you don't, it's a maybe 6 hour hike to go down, and will take a lot longer when you don't have gravity with you when you're coming back up. So you pretty much have to stay overnight if you're going all the way down. And I kept calling the ranger station, the backcountry permit station, about every week to see if there had been any cancellations, and never ended up with a permit. The ranger got pretty perturbed at me, actually. I told you I'd call you if something came up. You're still on the waiting list. Stop calling. So we resigned ourselves to that we couldn't go down. We got there, didn't have a permit. So these are some of the structures that you can see if you drive along the South Rim. There's an Indian Watchtower. Famous Western designer Mary Coulter designed this. The interior is all original Hopi designs and stuff. There's quite a gift shop in there as well. The El Tovar, speaking of magnificent old lodges, this was built in 1905, sits right on the edge of the canyon. It's absolutely exquisite. This is the registration area where you come in. I mean, can you see having dinner and looking out your plate glass window alongside your table at the sunset on the Grand Canyon? It's a pretty exclusive place to stay. So we're hiking along the rim, and we stayed. If you look over on the left-hand side, there's, in the blue writing, it says Backcountry Information Center. We were parked in the parking area next to it and having a bite to eat, and I looked over and saw the sign for the backcountry office, and I said, what the heck. I walked over and went in the door. There was a young ranger, summer help, facing the counter, and I started like pulling the string on my back. I started, "Hi, my name's Steve Farrar. I was on the waiting list. I'm looking to see if there's any cancellations and stuff." Well, the kid didn't do anything, but the older guy who had his back to me behind him whirled around. He recognized my voice, and he points at me, he goes, "You!" He knew who I was just from the voice. And I thought I was about to get a bawling out. Instead, he cracks up laughing. He starts laughing and he says, "You are not going to believe this." He said, "We got a call not 10 minutes ago from a family who had one of the permits for the campgrounds that night. Their RV broke down in Flagstaff, and they called to say that they weren't going to be able to use the campsite." He said, "There's a cancellation." So I grabbed the permit and ran back to the boys, and we took the shuttle over to the trailhead, the South Kaibab Trail, and threw backpacks together, and we got a chance to hike down and get to the bottom. So it was very serendipitous, very last minute. Literally, he said, "I don't know if you still want it." It was like 2:30 in the afternoon, and it's about a 6 hour hike to get down there. I said, "We'll take it." So you have to step aside and let the mules come back up, because they've been down delivering supplies to Phantom Ranch and visitors who didn't want to hike down. But there's absolutely no substitute for hiking down. Yes, from the top you can see that it's a very big hole in the ground. But as you start hiking down through eons and eons of layers of geology, it really hits home how many strata of how many years of geology is on display here. It's actually fairly, in geological terms, it's relatively young. It was the San Andreas Fault during an earthquake, when the San Andreas opened up, that opened a opening for the Colorado River to flow out to the Baja, and then it started flowing and carved over the last 5 million years the Grand Canyon. In geological term, that's not all that old, and it's still carving. It's 2,400 feet at the river, and it's up to 8,000 feet on the North Rim. So very, very different climates and flora and fauna. You got to have pretty good eyes if you're going to see any wildlife, because the camouflage is awesome. That's how you stay alive in the desert. You have good camouflage. So if you're going to see these guys, you got to be looking in the right place, because they don't move very much, and you would miss them. As I say, the river is still flooding. There's not a lot of space there. It's still carving the canyon, so there aren't too many areas that have flat space where you could put a tent or stay there. The depth of the canyon it's growing deeper and deeper by the thickness of a sheet of paper each year. And when you see the river flowing, you think, come on, it's got to be eroding more than that. But I'll believe the geologists. So here's Phantom Ranch. They do have accommodations. You can make a reservation for a bed, and they have family style meals served there and stuff. The fire ring out back, there's a ranger talk each night. So we set up our tents and then came over to listen to Ranger Judy. She was a little bit of a thing. She was about 5 feet tall, but she held forth that night on. She was talking about the critters that live in the inner canyon, down at the floor of the canyon. And one of the ones she was talking about was the scorpion, which, as you know, are poisonous. And it's not a good thing to get stung down there, because there's not, you can't get medevaced out of there or anything. There's no hospital facility nearby. So she said, you want to, when you get back to, if you're camping out, you want to make sure you shake out your sleeping bag before crawling in, because they want to warm up too. And if they find a sleeping bag that's been rolled out, they'll crawl in. And when you slide your bare feet in and disturb them, that might not have a good result. So here she got us all scared about scorpions. And then she ends up her talk by asking, anybody want to join me on a scorpion hunt? And we said, what the devil are you talking about? Well, scorpions, if under black lights, glow lime green. So she had a dozen or so handheld black lights that she handed out. And we went walking around the place with a black light. You want to have nightmares. Wait till you see how many scorpions there are. You can't see them normally, but when you're lighting them up like this, they're everywhere. They're all over the place. So we went on a scorpion hike that night. None got in our sleeping bags. So after last minute tossing a few Nutri-Grain bars in our pack and some water, that was about all we had for food. We ended up, she let us join them for breakfast the next morning. So here we are at the bottom of the Grand Canyon, having all you can eat pancakes and syrup and orange juice and bacon and peaches and all kinds of stuff. It wasn't exactly roughing it. We did stop and see some of the rafters come through. I had the boys go dunk their heads in the water. They said, what do we got to do that for? I said, do you know that over 99% of the people that come to the Grand Canyon never step 1 inch below the surface, the rim? I said, you're amongst an elite few that got all the way down here. Go dunk your head in the water to prove it. So they did that, and then we started up. And we came down the South Kaibab Trail. We went up the Bright Angel Trail. And boy, you when gravity's not in your favor, you develop an appreciation for how far down you went, because it just goes up and up and up, and it just seems never ending. You got to step to the side for the ones that are coming down on the donkeys, on the mules. But then you just keep plodding up and up and up. And a relief when you do get up there. Waiting for the electronic shuttle to get us back. It was only a couple hundred yards over to our car, but we'll take a ride. And then you're up there for the afternoon and the sunset, and as the sun changes, again, all kinds of different shades and shadows dance around. This is an odd picture. This is an inversion, temperature inversion, when the clouds drop and it's clear above and the clouds are down in the canyon. But sunset sitting on the edge of the camera, the edge of the canyon, is an image that kind of burns itself into your mind's eye. It's not one that you'll soon forget. And they have telescopes at night too, so you can do sky watching outside of the park. So that's our 7 parks that we're going to visit. If you're down this way, there is another place you might want to visit down in the southern stretch of the canyon. It's on Indian reservation land. They've built a skywalk. About $30 million they put into this. From an aerial view looking down, they're trying to build a big resort, like a casino, and make an Indian reservation out of it. But they've got this skywalk that juts out over the ridge of the canyon, the center of which is glass. So you can look 800 feet straight down underneath you. It only goes out like 50 feet or so, but you'll notice that most people are on the sidewalk, solid portion of it, not standing on the glass. It's different. If you want to visit this spot, Aposupe Falls is, again, on Indian reservation, so you have to hire a tribal guide to bring you out to it. The coloration is picked up by the minerals in the water, so it's this deep turquoise color, and you can swim in the pools there and stuff. It's a pretty majestical spot. And if you're in Arizona, right dead center, by the reservation, or by the reservoir on the south shore, is the town of Page, Arizona. It's just below the Utah line. Page, Arizona is home to Antelope Canyon. And if you're down there, there's a magazine in Arizona called Arizona Highway. You'll normally see pictures taken in Antelope Canyon on it. It's absolutely beautiful. It's a slot canyon. There's our Navajo guide and my son Galen that we had to hire in order to go visit it. It's a photographer's dream. The sun, the shadows, when the sun's directly overhead, you get the beam of light, like God turned his flashlight on and is shining it down into the depths. It's an amazing place. But even another one that's even more so is up in the Vermilion Cliffs National Monument. This is a place called the Wave. That's solid sandstone. I brought my brothers there. My brother Andy took the picture, and Pete and I are in the picture. There's, again, it used to be the floor of an inland sea, and the water evaporated, so it looks fluid, but it's this area. That's the Wave down at the bottom there. I climbed up to an arch way up above it. This takes some doing to get to. 10 people a day are all that can get permits. You have to drive way up into Kanab, Utah, to the Bureau of, the original BLM, which stands for the Bureau of Land Management. The BLM office has a daily lottery, and they put your names in a hat, and when they draw it out, if you have a group of 4 that want to go there, then only 6 other people can go for the next day. 10 people a day are allowed into the place. So it's a pretty cool place to visit. But that's our iconic view of the West. And I highly recommend you go visit them. They're your parks. You own them. You pay for them. This is a t-shirt that you can buy out there. I own it. 84 million acres. That's our national parks. I highly recommend you go see them.
So Steve, are you ready for some questions?
Yeah, fire away.
Perfect. Virginia would like to know, are drones allowed in the parks for picture taking?
No national parks allow drones in them. My son was going to bring his this summer because we wanted to we were going down into slot canyons and stuff, and we wanted to get a view from up above. So we contacted the parks, and we're very brusquely informed that not within the borders of the parks. To save, they're not real noisy, but it's just, no, you can't invade the airspace. They don't allow drones in any national parks.
Christopher says, whenever you travel to national parks, don't forget your passports to collect stamps. These are available at stores within the national parks or at eparks.com.
There's a lot of different ways. When we next have, right behind me is a burlap set. I have collected the embroidered patches from each park that I've visited. My hiking staff, if I do a particularly memorable hike in a particular park, you can get staff emblems that can be pinned to your hiking staff. There are passport stamps that are dated that you can get at the visitor centers for a National Park Service passport. There's all kinds of different ways that you can remember. I'll show you a collage next time. I've taken, you notice that the entrance signs that I introduce each of the parks with, I've taken a picture of me at each entrance sign to all of the national parks. So from Acadia to Zion, I have all of the parks with me standing at the entrance signs to them and stuff. You can get pretty creative as to how you choose to remember your visits, but the passport stamp is one of them. And actually there's 419 places to get stamps. All of the, and they're starting to blur the edges because the Park Service is starting to refer to units under their jurisdiction as national parks. They're not. There's national battlefields, there's national memorials, there's national recreation areas, there's all kinds of different national designations, the crown jewels of which are the 62 national parks. That's another presentation where I draw the distinction between all 419. But if you wanted to see all of the units that are administered to by the National Park Service, you could end up with 419 stamps in your passport book.
Virginia says regarding Zion, it looks like quite a drop from the trail. Is there a history of casualties?
Yes, actually, the warning sign at the bottom says that people die on this trail. And when I was taking our boys there, my wife didn't trust me with her boys, so she insisted that I bring another adult along. At the time, I was a scoutmaster of a Boy Scout troop, and I invited my assistant scoutmaster and his son to come along. So we had 3 teenage boys and the 2 of us. And when we started up Walter's Wiggles, the assistant scoutmaster, Steve, looked at, he was a little shaky. I said, "What's the matter?" Because I knew he was in good shape. He said, "Well, I didn't tell you I'm afraid of heights." I said, "Steve, didn't you see the 10-foot tall sign at the bottom that says, this is not a good trail if you're afraid of heights?" It's you should know that at the outset. They take great pains to make you aware that it's very dangerous, and a lot of people have died falling off of it. So it's not for the faint of heart. Yes, it is dangerous, but nobody twists your arm to go up there. It's of your own volition.
A lot of positive comments regarding Moab. Mary says, my daughter and her family have lived in Moab for over 20 years.
Oh my.
Shelley says, I visited Moab in October. It's so beautiful there. Ginny says, I did whitewater rafting trip suitable for a 3-year-old in the Moab area back in 1976. Ginny's dating herself a little bit there. Christopher says seniors can get annual passes for $20. Non-senior annual is $80, but if you have 4 of them, you can turn them into a lifetime pass. Can you speak about the cost of the passes at all, Steve?
Yeah, I mentioned that on my 62nd birthday, which is when you're eligible for the senior pass. I went down I live in southern New Hampshire, so the nearest visitor center, NPS visitor center to me is the Lowell Mills. So I went down there on my 62nd birthday and walked into the visitor center holding a $20 bill, and the ranger started singing, "Somebody had a birthday." You bet, baby, fork it over. So I got it when it was still $20. The lifetime pass has now gone up to $80. But some of the entrance fees are $25, $35 per person. to go in. If you have the lifetime pass, it's not only good for you, but up to 4 people in your car. So you get a whole carload of people in at no additional charge. So it doesn't take long to make your $80 back. And they're good for every National Park Service location that charges an entrance fee. So it's a good investment, and you can get them at any visitor centers, or I guess you can, it doesn't have a picture, but you have to show a photo ID and prove that it's yours if you're going to use one.
Steve,
you can buy annual ones for less money.
Mm-hmm. We got about a handful of questions left. If anyone has any additional questions, get them into the chat now, because we're going to wrap by 8:30. This might be a sore subject for you. We talked about it briefly before we started. Linda wants to know, which park have you not visited yet?
I love that, because I say I've been to 61 of 62, and I never ever get questioned about the 61. What I get asked about is, well, which one's left? Glacier Bay in Alaska, the only way to access Glacier Bay is from the sea. You can't get there from the Canadian side or anything. So this September, I was going to put the cherry on top of my bucket list. My wife and I were scheduled for a Holland America cruise up out of Seattle to get to Glacier Bay, one of the stops. And of course, COVID hit, and the cruise lines shut down all of the access. So the lodge, sometimes you can hire a small plane and fly into Gustavus and go up to the lodge there. The lodge didn't even open, because the only way that people get there are from the ocean, and the cruise liners shut down. So they didn't even open for business in 2020. So it was physically inaccessible. I couldn't get there. So I've already got my reservations for June to go there and get it. But Glacier Bay in Alaska is the only national park that I haven't visited.
Suzanne wants to know, do you do tours of some of the national parks, or perhaps can you recommend someone that does tours?
Timely question. I last Friday night finished the itinerary for my first tour that I will be leading. One of my boys, Brooks, owns a CrossFit facility over in Hopkinton, and he's got all these.
Was he the one with the six-pack?
What's that?
Was he the one with the abs?
Yes, oddly enough. He's getting the same question from his guys. Now he's got them trained, and they want to go, okay, now what can we do with the stuff? So we've been getting pressure we know about all these cool places. Well, why don't you bring us there? I just finished, I can only take 6 clients, but we're going to do a Sierra Nevada trip to do hikes in Sequoia, Kings Canyon, and 4 days in Yosemite, climbing up to the top of Half Dome and to the top of El Capitan. Not up the sheer rock faces of it. You can get to each of them from the back country. But you can go to my web. We're going to have a website further. You can get my email from peglegpresentations.com. Or give Robert a call. You can, from the library, you can get my contact information, and be glad to talk to you about it and get a flyer out. I haven't even put a flyer together. We just planned it. It's a week-long trip to the Sierra Nevadas, but because of questions like yours, we are forming a tour company, pretty exclusive. You got to be in pretty good shape to go on them.
And Steve, I'll include your website address in the email I send tomorrow to everyone who registered.
Thanks.
Diane wants to know, and I apologize, I forget which park this was regarding. What is the name of the falls where the native Indian guided you to?
It's outside the borders of Grand Canyon. It's to the south. So you have to drive outside the borders of Grand Canyon National Park and come at it from the south. It's kind of hard to get to. It's an overnight trip to get in there. It's Aposupe Falls, which is the name of the Indian tribe, south of Grand Canyon.
Got it. Deborah wants to know, do you have a favorite park?
The way I interpret that question is if I had a week to go back and spend in one park, which park would it be? I would say Olympic National Park because, and that's a long answer. That'll take us past 8:30. But basically, Olympic is on the Olympic Peninsula across Puget Sound from Seattle. It's essentially 3 different parks in one. If you come up, drive around from Seattle and come up the east side, you could be in the Swiss Alps. They're high alpine meadows. You're looking across at glacier-covered 8,000-foot Olympic mountains. Then you drive around to the western side, and you could be in Indonesia in a rainforest. The area, the jet stream comes across the Pacific, slams into the Olympic Mountains, and dumps all its water. The area gets over 350 inches of rain a year. It's a tropical rainforest. Totally different from the high alpine area. But then you can drive over in it with a 5-mile walk, get out to the Pacific Rim section of the park, and there are sea stacks and tide pools, and you can hike along the beach. There's a marine component to the park. So you have sea, rainforest, and alpine mountains. And I didn't even hike up into the mountains. That's where the Roosevelt elk herds are in the summer and stuff. Some parks you can go to and in an afternoon say you've done the park, or yes, I saw that park. Olympic isn't that. You need some time in Olympic. You don't just blow in and get your stamp at the visitor center and say that you saw Olympic. It takes a while to see it. So it's a long-winded answer to say I would go to Olympic.
Well, and as a segue, Rachel wants to know, how long do you suggest spending at the parks?
Well, and as I just mentioned, it depends on which park you're talking about.
Right.
And in how thoroughly you want to get to it. Overnights, and I'm turning 66. I don't do quite so much backcountry camping as I used to anymore. The lodges look pretty nice at this stage of the game, but there is no substitute for getting outside. And you don't even need, if you're going in the summer, you don't even need tents. The desert areas that we just looked at are so dry, you don't have mosquitoes. There are no bugs or anything. It's blissfully free of that. If you go up to Voyagers or the Boundary Waters up in Minnesota or something, different story, or Glacier in the summer, you're going to have issues, but depends on the park, I guess, because some of them you can go to in an afternoon and say, okay, I've seen what there is to see. Other ones demand that they're just, if you want to say that you've seen what there is to see, you gotta make some time for it.
And then last question goes to Mike, and then I'll read some comments, Steve, that will boost your ego a little bit. But Mike wants to know, since you kind of mentioned it, Mike wants to know the story behind what was your 61st park?
The brand new one. There was just a White Sands National Monument was upgraded 1 year ago in December by illicit means. The congressman from New Mexico put a one-liner into the omnibus bill that Trump had to sign to pass the defense budget, and included in the bill was verbiage upgrading White Sands National Monument to White Sands National Park. So because I had reservations at that last December, we didn't know about COVID yet, and I thought I was going to be getting the last park in September, so I had to schedule a visit so that I'd get 61 out of the way with. So I went down there in August, and it was 105 degrees when I was out in the desert in New Mexico, but wonderful time. That's in my southern grouping of parks. I have divided the national parks into 9 different similar, this was one of 9 different presentations that it takes to cover. Each one has 6 or 7 or 8 different parks in it. I've just arbitrarily divided into the Pacific Northwest or the Central Parks or the East Coast or whatever. Each of the presentations covers half a dozen or so parks. So if you had a good time and liked what you saw visiting the Colorado Plateau parks, there's another group of the island parks. There's another similar presentation for the Western parks down the Sierra Nevadas. There's a whole bunch of them.
Yeah, when folks fill out the feedback survey over the next week, let me know which national parks you'd like Steve to do next. Okay, we'll definitely bring him back, whether it's virtual or in person, and when we'll figure that out. But we had Steve last year, we had Steve this year, and I'm sure we'll have Steve again. So let me read a few comments to you, Steve, and then we'll wrap up. Marie says, thank you. Really enjoyed your photos and stories. Shelley said, beautiful area around the Puget Sound. Judith says, thank you. This was great. Stunning photos. Linda says, excellent presentation. Thank you. Rachel says, thank you. Love seeing the pictures. Mary says, wonderful presentation. Very good explanation on how arches were formed. Fury Furnace is quite an experience. Thank you. I planned on sending recording info to my daughter who lives in Moab. Shelley says this was very enjoyable and informative. Harriet says, I want to thank you for making my night so enjoyable. This was the best. Linda says, hurrah on the encore. Deborah says, nice presentation, thank you. And Rachel says, can't wait to hear more about national parks. So, Steve, do you have any last words for the group? Any last bits of wisdom you want to impart before we leave?
No, I think you got the gist of it. I mean, it's kind of walking a tightrope between, I don't want to lecture you, but I want everybody to come away, hopefully having learned something about the parks, and maybe get teased a little about what's out there waiting for you, so that you get inspired to go see it for yourself.
Suzanne says, I need to sneak you in my bags. So when she wants to take you with her when she visits the parks. So
okay.
On that note, we will wrap it up. I want to thank everyone for joining us tonight. Feedback survey and recording will go out via email tomorrow morning. Thank you all so much, and I hope everyone has a great night, and don't watch too much cable news tonight, okay?
Right.
Everyone have a great night.
This was a much better use of your time.
There you go. Thank you so much, Stephen. Everyone have a great night.